GhastlyGarlic Episode 5 The Shadow's Curse of Bhangarh Fort. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the rugged terrain of Rajasthan as Raghav and his friends approached Bhangarh Fort. The imposing structure, silhouetted against the fading light, stood as a silent sentinel over the desolate landscape. The dry, arid plains stretched out in all directions, interrupted only by occasional clusters of scrub and the jagged outlines of distant hills. Raghav, a young historian with a deep fascination for India's ancient monuments, felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as he led the group along the narrow path to the fort's entrance. With him were Meera, an aspiring archaeologist eager to uncover hidden truths, Vikram, a skeptical engineer with a reluctant interest in the supernatural, and Priya, a journalist always on the hunt for her next big story. As they neared the fort, an eerie silence descended, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a peacock. The fort's ancient walls, weathered by centuries of wind and rain, loomed large against the darkening sky. The massive stone structure seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were a living entity bearing witness to countless untold stories. Raghav stopped just short of the entrance, turning to address his friends. "Bhangarh Fort," he began, his voice tinged with reverence and a hint of foreboding. The fort was constructed in the 17th century by Raja Madho Singh, the younger brother of the great Mughal general, Man Singh of Amber. This place, however, is as much a monument to tragedy as it is to architectural grandeur. Meera's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Why was it abandoned? What happened here? Raghav nodded, as if expecting the question. According to legend, the fort was cursed by a powerful wizard named Bala Nath. He lived nearby and was deeply opposed to the construction of the fort, fearing it would cast a shadow over his ascetic retreat. When Raja Madho Singh sought his approval, Bala Nath reluctantly agreed on the condition that the fort's shadows would never fall upon his home. If they did, he warned, the fort would be doomed. Vikram, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. A curse. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale. Raghav smiled faintly. Perhaps, but the stories persist. Bala Nath's warning was ignored, and the fort's expansion soon cast its shadow over his dwelling. True to his word, the fort fell into ruin shortly thereafter. But there's another, even more compelling legend associated with this place. As they stepped through the massive gate, its heavy wooden doors slightly ajar and creaking ominously, Raghav continued his tale. The story of Princess Ratnavati. She was the daughter of Chhatra Singh, the ruler of Bhangarh, and was renowned for her beauty and wisdom. Suitors came from far and wide to seek her hand in marriage. Priya, ever the romantic, leaned in closer. What happened to her? Raghav's expression grew somber. A wizard named Singhya, who was infatuated with her, tried to win her love through dark magic. He concocted a love potion and disguised it as perfume. But Ratnavati, being perceptive, saw through his plan. She poured the potion onto a large boulder, which rolled down and crushed Singhya to death. With his dying breath, he cursed the princess, her family, and the entire fort, condemning them to doom and despair. The group fell silent, absorbing the weight of the tale. The fading light cast long shadows across the walls, giving the fort an even more ghostly appearance. As they ventured deeper into the fort, the sense of unease grew, as if the very stones were whispering the stories of those who had perished within its walls. They entered a vast courtyard, its once grand fountains now dry and cracked. The walls were adorned with faded frescoes, depicting scenes of royal life and battles fought long ago. In the center of the courtyard stood a large banyan tree, its gnarled roots twisting and turning like the tendrils of time itself. Raghav led them to a small temple at the far end of the courtyard. The temple, dedicated to Lord Shiva, was in a state of disrepair, but its sanctity remained intact. This temple, Raghav explained, is said to be the only place in Bhangarh that is free from the curse. It's believed that the deity's presence protects it from any malevolent forces. As they stood in the temple's cool interior, Meera felt a chill run down her spine. "Do you think the curse is real?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raghav sighed, his gaze fixed on the ancient idol of Lord Shiva. Whether the curse is real or not, the fear it instills is very much tangible. Over the years, there have been numerous reports of paranormal activity here. People have heard footsteps, seen apparitions, and felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The Archaeological Survey of India has even put up a sign prohibiting visitors from entering the fort after sunset. Vikram, trying to lighten the mood, quipped, "Well, I guess we're not the superstitious type, are we?" But the jest fell flat, and the group remained quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The oppressive atmosphere of the fort seemed to weigh heavily on them, as if the very air was charged with the memories of those who had once lived and died within these walls. As they exited the temple and made their way towards the royal palace, the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fort into an inky darkness. The moon, half hidden behind a veil of clouds, provided little illumination, and the group had to rely on their flashlights to navigate the labyrinthine corridors. The palace, once a symbol of grandeur and opulence, was now a crumbling ruin. Its walls were adorned with intricate carvings, now eroded by time, and the floors were littered with debris. As they explored the deserted halls, the sound of their footsteps echoed eerily, amplifying the sense of isolation and abandonment. In one of the chambers, they came across a large, ornately carved mirror, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust. Meera, unable to resist, wiped away the grime, revealing a reflection that seemed to shimmer and waver in the dim light. "It's beautiful," she murmured, tracing the intricate designs with her fingers. "Imagine all the people who must have looked into this mirror, all the lives that passed through this place." Priya, who had been recording their journey on her camera, nodded. "It's like stepping back in time. There's a certain melancholy beauty to it, don't you think?" But as she spoke, the air grew colder, and a sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing their flashlights. The group was plunged into darkness, and for a moment, panic set in. They fumbled with their flashlights, trying to reignite them, but the darkness seemed to press in on them from all sides. Then, faintly at first, they heard it, the sound of distant, echoing footsteps. The sound grew louder, closer, until it seemed to be right next to them. Heart pounding, Raghav managed to get his flashlight working, casting a beam of light across the chamber, but there was nothing there. The chamber was empty, save for the dust and shadows. The footsteps ceased, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. Vikram, his face pale, tried to laugh it off. Probably just the wind. Old places like this can play tricks on you. But the fear in his eyes betrayed his bravado, and the group huddled closer together, their nerves on edge. They decided to stick together for the rest of their exploration, unwilling to risk getting separated in the oppressive darkness. As they made their way through the palace, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows seemed to shift and move in the corners of their vision, and the sound of whispered voices lingered in the air. Every creak and groan of the ancient structure seemed amplified, adding to the sense of foreboding. Eventually, they reached the top of the palace, where a large terrace overlooked the fort and the surrounding landscape. The view was breathtaking, with the moon casting a silvery glow over the ruins, but the beauty was tinged with an unshakable sense of dread. Raghav took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "We've seen enough for tonight. Let's head back and regroup. We can continue our exploration in the morning." The group agreed, relieved to be leaving the fort's oppressive atmosphere behind. As they made their way back down through the palace, the sense of being watched persisted, but they forced themselves to focus on the path ahead, determined to reach the safety of their vehicle. As they exited the fort and walked towards the parking area, the cool night air brought a welcome sense of relief. The oppressive weight of the fort's atmosphere seemed to lift, replaced by the familiar sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl. They reached their car and quickly piled in, eager to put some distance between themselves and the fort. As they drove away, the silhouette of Bhangarh Fort receded into the darkness, but its presence lingered in their minds, a haunting reminder of the night's experiences. Back at their hotel, they gathered in the small dining area, each lost in their thoughts. Raghav broke the silence, his voice thoughtful. "Whether the legends are true or not, there's no denying that Bhangarh Fort has a powerful presence. It's as if the very air is charged with the energy of its past." Meera nodded. "I've never felt anything like it. It's almost as if the fort is alive, watching us, testing us." Priya, reviewing the footage she'd captured, added, "There's definitely something there. I can't explain it, but the atmosphere, the sounds, it's all too real to be just our imagination." Vikram, still skeptical but visibly shaken, sighed. "I don't know what to believe anymore. But one thing's for sure, That place is unlike anything I've ever experienced." As they sat together, discussing their experiences and sharing their thoughts, a sense of camaraderie began to form. They were bound by the shared experience of their visit to Bhangarh Fort, and the mysteries they had encountered had ignited a determination to uncover the truth. Little did they know that their journey had only just begun. The legends of Bhangarh Fort were far from over, and the secrets hidden within its ancient walls were waiting to be revealed. The shadows of the past were closing in, and the group would soon find themselves drawn deeper into a web of intrigue, danger, and the supernatural. As the night wore on, they made a pact to return to Bhangarh Fort the next day, to continue their exploration and seek out the truth behind the legends. They knew the risks, but their curiosity and determination outweighed their fear. And so, with the dawn of a new day, they would embark on the next chapter of their journey, ready to face whatever the fort had in store for them. The legend of Bhangarh was far from over, and their quest for answers was just beginning. They retired to their rooms, each carrying the weight of their thoughts and the events of the day. Raghav lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with the possibilities of what they might discover. The stories he had read, the accounts of paranormal activity, and the unexplained phenomena were now more real than ever. The historian in him was eager to unravel the truth, to separate fact from fiction. Meera, in her room, was equally restless. The artifacts they had seen, the ruins they had walked through, all held a story waiting to be told. She couldn't wait to dig deeper, to explore the fort with a more analytical eye. The archaeologist in her was excited at the prospect of uncovering relics and piecing together the history of Bhangarh Fort. Priya reviewed her notes and footage, her journalist instincts kicking into overdrive. This was more than just a story, it was an adventure, a mystery that could captivate her audience. She knew that their experiences at Bhangarh could make for compelling reading, but more than that, she felt a personal drive to understand the truth behind the legends. Vikram, though still skeptical, couldn't deny the strange occurrences they had witnessed. He was a man of science and reason, yet the fort had challenged his beliefs. He decided to approach the next day's exploration with an open mind, ready to test the limits of his skepticism. Morning came with the first light of dawn casting a golden hue over the landscape. The group gathered for breakfast, discussing their plan for the day. They decided to explore different sections of the fort more systematically, with each member focusing on their area of expertise. Raghav would delve into the historical context, Meera would search for archaeological evidence, Priya would document their findings, and Vikram would look for any rational explanations for the paranormal activity they had experienced. As they approached the fort once again, the atmosphere felt different. The daylight brought a sense of normalcy, yet the fort's eerie presence was still palpable. They split up, agreeing to meet back at the temple in a few hours. Raghav headed towards the library, a section of the fort that had once housed ancient manuscripts and records. He hoped to find documents that could shed light on the fort's history and the people who lived there. The room was in disarray, with shelves broken and scrolls scattered on the floor. He carefully sifted through the debris, finding fragments of texts and inscriptions. Each piece he uncovered seemed to whisper stories of the past, of a once thriving community now lost to time. Meera made her way to the residential quarters, where she believed she might find artifacts that could tell her more about the daily lives of the fort's inhabitants. She meticulously examined the rooms, looking for pottery, tools, and other items that could offer insights into their culture and way of life. In one room, she found a small, intricately carved box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside, it held a collection of jewelry and trinkets, possibly belonging to a noblewoman. The discovery thrilled her, as it provided a tangible connection to the people who once lived in Bhangarh. Priya focused on capturing the fort's grandeur and the eerie beauty of its ruins. She documented everything, from the grand halls to the smallest details, hoping to convey the fort's atmosphere through her lens. As she moved through the fort, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Several times, she caught glimpses of shadows moving in the corner of her eye, but every time she turned to look, there was nothing there. The sense of being followed grew stronger, and she decided to head back to the meeting point. Vikram, with his scientific mind, explored the areas where they had experienced the most activity the previous night. He set up equipment to measure temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic fields, and other environmental factors that could explain the strange phenomena. He was determined to find a logical explanation, but as he reviewed his data, he found anomalies that he couldn't easily dismiss. The temperature drops and spikes in EMF readings seemed to coincide with the moments they had felt the strongest sense of unease. It was as if the fort itself was reacting to their presence. They reconvened at the temple, each sharing their findings. Raghav had found references to the construction of the fort and mentions of Bala Nath and Princess Ratnavati, lending some credence to the legends. Meera's discovery of the box and its contents provided a personal connection to the fort's past. Priya's footage captured the fort's haunting beauty, but also the inexplicable shadows and movements. Vikram's data suggested that there was indeed something unusual about the fort. As they discussed their findings, the air grew heavy with anticipation. They realized that the fort held more secrets than they had initially thought, and each discovery only deepened the mystery. They decided to focus their next exploration on the areas most closely associated with the legends, the wizard's retreat and the boulder that supposedly killed Singhia. The retreat was a small cave on a hill overlooking the fort. The path to it was steep and treacherous, but they were determined to reach it. As they climbed, the sense of being watched returned, stronger than ever. The wind howled through the rocks, carrying with it whispers and faint cries. They reached the cave, its entrance barely visible through the overgrowth. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and the walls were covered in ancient carvings and symbols. Raghav translated some of the inscriptions, which spoke of dark rituals and powerful curses. The boulder was located in a secluded part of the fort, surrounded by dense vegetation. It was an imposing stone, larger than they had imagined, with deep grooves and markings that suggested it had been moved with great force. Meera examined the area, looking for any signs of disturbance or historical significance. She found remnants of what looked like an ancient altar, confirming that this place had been used for rituals. As they stood by the boulder, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the fort. The atmosphere grew tense, and the air seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. They felt a sudden chill, and the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The boulder, which had stood immobile for centuries, began to tremble. Panic set in as they realized the curse of Bhangarh might be more than just a legend. The ground shook violently, and the boulder shifted, rolling towards them. They scrambled to get out of its path, barely escaping as it crashed down, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Breathless and shaken, they regrouped at the temple, the only place they felt safe. The experience had shaken their belief systems, forcing them to confront the possibility that the supernatural might be real. They decided to leave the fort for the night, needing time to process what had happened and plan their next steps. Back at the hotel, they sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The events of the day had left a deep impression on them, and they knew their quest for answers was far from over. The fort had revealed its secrets gradually, and they were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Raghav spoke first, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We need to be careful. Whatever is happening at Bhangarh, it's powerful and dangerous, but we can't stop now. We owe it to ourselves, and to history, to uncover the truth." Meera nodded. "We need more information. We should talk to the locals, gather more stories and accounts. There might be clues we've missed." Priya agreed. "I'll review the footage again, look for anything we might have overlooked. And I'll write about our experiences so far. People need to know about this." Vikram, though still grappling with his skepticism, added, "I'll analyze the data again, look for patterns. There has to be a scientific explanation, or at least something we can use to understand what's happening." They spent the night planning their next move, determined to return to Bhangarh Fort with a clearer strategy and a deeper understanding. The legends of the fort were more than just stories, they were a puzzle waiting to be solved, and they were the ones to solve it. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they prepared to face the fort once more. The legend of Bhangarh had only just begun to reveal its secrets, and their journey was far from over. They were ready to confront whatever lay ahead, armed with their knowledge, their courage, and their unyielding curiosity. The morning sun broke over the horizon, casting a golden hue over the ancient walls of Bhangarh Fort. The previous day's events lingered in the minds of Raghav and his friends, a potent mix of awe and fear that fueled their determination to uncover the truth. They gathered their equipment, reviewed their plans, and set off towards the fort once more. ready to delve deeper into its mysteries. As they approached the fort, the atmosphere felt different in the daylight. The eerie presence they had felt during the night seemed to have retreated, replaced by a deceptive calm. They split up once again, each heading towards their designated areas of interest, determined to uncover more clues about the legends that shrouded Bhangarh. Raghav made his way back to the library, hoping to find more documents that could shed light on the fort's history. He carefully sifted through the scattered scrolls and manuscripts, piecing together fragments of the past. His patience was rewarded when he found a scroll that detailed the life of Princess Ratnavati and her tragic fate. According to the scroll, Ratnavati had been a beloved figure, known for her beauty and wisdom. The people of Bhangarh had looked up to her, and her untimely death had plunged the fort into despair. Meera returned to the residential quarters, eager to continue her search for artifacts. She carefully examined the rooms, looking for anything that could provide insights into the daily lives of the fort's inhabitants. In one of the rooms, she found a small, intricately carved box hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside, it held a collection of jewelry and trinkets, possibly belonging to a noble woman. The discovery thrilled her, as it provided a tangible connection to the people who once lived in Bhangarh. Priya focused on capturing the fort's grandeur and the eerie beauty of its ruins. She documented everything, from the grand halls to the smallest details, hoping to convey the fort's atmosphere through her lens. As she moved through the fort, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Several times, she caught glimpses of shadows moving in the corner of her eye, but every time she turned to look, there was nothing there. The sense of being followed grew stronger, and she decided to head back to the meeting point. Vikram, with his scientific mind, explored the areas where they had experienced the most activity the previous night. He set up equipment to measure temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic fields, and other environmental factors that could explain the strange phenomena. He was determined to find a logical explanation, but as he reviewed his data, he found anomalies that he couldn't easily dismiss. The temperature drops and spikes in EMF readings seemed to coincide with the moments they had felt the strongest sense of unease. It was as if the fort itself was reacting to their presence. As the day wore on, they reconvened at the temple, each sharing their findings. Raghav had found references to the construction of the fort and mentions of Bala Nath and Princess Ratnavati, lending some credence to the legends. Meera's discovery of the box and its contents provided a personal connection to the fort's past. Priya's footage captured the fort's haunting beauty, but also the inexplicable shadows and movements. Vikram's data suggested that there was indeed something unusual about the fort. They decided to focus their next exploration on the areas most closely associated with the legends, the wizard's retreat and the boulder that supposedly killed Singhia. The retreat was a small cave on a hill overlooking the fort. The path to it was steep and treacherous, but they were determined to reach it. As they climbed, the sense of being watched returned, stronger than ever. The wind howled through the rocks, carrying with it whispers and faint cries. They reached the cave, its entrance barely visible through the overgrowth. Inside, the air was cool and damp, and the walls were covered in ancient carvings and symbols. Raghav translated some of the inscriptions, which spoke of dark rituals and powerful curses. The boulder was located in a secluded part of the fort, surrounded by dense vegetation. It was an imposing stone, larger than they had imagined, with deep grooves and markings that suggested it had been moved with great force. Meera examined the area, looking for any signs of disturbance or historical significance. She found remnants of what looked like an ancient altar, confirming that this place had been used for rituals. As they stood by the boulder, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the fort. The atmosphere grew tense, and the air seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. They felt a sudden chill, and the ground beneath them seemed to shift. The boulder, which had stood immobile for centuries, began to tremble. Panic set in as they realized the curse of Bhangarh might be more than just a legend. The ground shook violently, and the boulder shifted, rolling towards them. They scrambled to get out of its path, barely escaping as it crashed down, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Breathless and shaken, they regrouped at the temple, the only place they felt safe. The experience had shaken their belief systems, forcing them to confront the possibility that the supernatural might be real. They decided to leave the fort for the night, needing time to process what had happened and plan their next steps. Back at the hotel, They sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The events of the day had left a deep impression on them, and they knew their quest for answers was far from over. The fort had revealed its secrets gradually, and they were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Raghav spoke first, his voice steady but filled with resolve. We need to be careful. Whatever is happening at Bhangarh, it's powerful and dangerous, but we can't stop now. We owe it to ourselves, and to history, to uncover the truth. Meera nodded. We need more information. We should talk to the locals, gather more stories and accounts. There might be clues we've missed. Priya agreed. I'll review the footage again, look for anything we might have overlooked, and I'll write about our experiences so far. People need to know about this. Vikram, though still grappling with his skepticism, added, I'll analyze the data again, look for patterns. There has to be a scientific explanation, or at least something we can use to understand what's happening. They spent the night planning their next move, determined to return to Bhangarh Fort with a clearer strategy and a deeper understanding. The legends of the fort were more than just stories, they were a puzzle waiting to be solved, and they were the ones to solve it. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they prepared to face the fort once more. The legend of Bhangarh had only just begun to reveal its secrets, and their journey was far from over. They were ready to confront whatever lay ahead, armed with their knowledge, their courage, and their unyielding curiosity. The next morning, they decided to visit the nearby village to gather more information from the locals. They hoped to find people who could provide first-hand accounts of their experiences with the fort and its legends. The village, a small cluster of houses surrounded by fields, was just a short drive from the fort. As they arrived, they were greeted with curious looks from the villagers, who were not accustomed to seeing many outsiders. Raghav approached an elderly man sitting on a charpoy outside his house. The man, with his weathered face and piercing eyes, looked up as they approached. Namaste, Raghav greeted him with a respectful bow. We are here to learn more about Bhangarh Fort. We are historians and researchers, and we want to understand the legends and stories associated with it. The old man nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied them. Bhangarh is not a place to be taken lightly, he said, his voice rough with age. The fort is cursed, and many have faced its wrath. But if you are determined to learn, I will tell you what I know. He gestured for them to sit, and the group gathered around him. The old man began to recount the stories that had been passed down through generations. He spoke of the curse of Bala Nath, the tragic fate of Princess Ratnavati, and the countless strange occurrences that had plagued the fort and its surroundings. My grandfather used to tell me stories of people who ventured into the fort after sunset and never returned, he said, his voice low and solemn. They say that the spirits of those who perished there still haunt the ruins, seeking vengeance or peace. There have been sightings of ghostly apparitions, and many have heard the sounds of footsteps and whispers in the dead of night. Meera leaned forward, intrigued. Have you ever experienced anything yourself? The old man nodded. Once, when I was a young boy, I wandered too close to the fort at dusk. I heard a woman's voice calling my name, but there was no one there. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and when I turned around, I saw the faint outline of a figure in the shadows. I ran back to the village as fast as I could and never went near the fort again. Priya took notes, capturing every detail. Do you know of anyone else who has had similar experiences? The old man looked thoughtful. There are many stories. Some say that the spirits are restless because their remains were never given a proper burial. Others believe that the fort is a portal to another realm, where the spirits are trapped and cannot find peace. Raghav thanked the old man for his time and information. As they walked back to their car, the group discussed the implications of what they had heard. The stories confirmed many of the legends they had read about, and the first-hand accounts added a new layer of authenticity to their research. Back at the fort, they decided to focus their investigation on the areas where the most paranormal activity had been reported. They set up their equipment and prepared for another night of exploration. This time, they were more prepared, armed with the knowledge they had gathered from the villagers. As the sun set and darkness enveloped the fort, the air grew thick with anticipation. They felt a sense of unease, as if the fort itself was aware of their presence. They split up into pairs, Raghav with Meera and Priya with Vikram, each pair heading to a different part of the fort. Raghav and Meera made their way to the library, hoping to uncover more documents that could provide clues about the fort's history and the events that led to its curse. As they sifted through the debris, they found a hidden compartment in one of the walls. Inside, they discovered a collection of scrolls and manuscripts that had been carefully preserved. Raghav carefully unrolled one of the scrolls, revealing an ancient map of the fort. The map showed hidden passages and chambers that they had not known existed. Excited by the discovery, they decided to explore these hidden areas, hoping to find more clues. Meanwhile, Priya and Vikram headed towards the wizard's retreat. The cave was dark and foreboding, the air inside cool and damp. They set up their cameras and EMF detectors, hoping to capture any paranormal activity. As they waited, the temperature suddenly dropped, and they felt a chilling presence. Priya held her breath as she saw a faint, ghostly figure materialize in front of them. It was the figure of a woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She reached out towards them, her expression one of sorrow and despair. Priya managed to capture the apparition on camera before it faded away, leaving them in stunned silence. Back in the library, Raghav and Meera followed the map to a hidden passage that led to a sealed chamber. With some effort, they managed to open the door and stepped inside. The chamber was filled with ancient artifacts and relics, each telling a story of the fort's past. In the center of the room, they found an altar with a large, ornate mirror. The mirror was covered in dust and grime, but as they wiped it clean, they saw their reflections change. Instead of their own faces, they saw the faces of people from another time, dressed in traditional attire. The reflections seemed to be trying to communicate with them, their expressions desperate and pleading. Raghav and Meera felt a surge of energy emanating from the mirror, as if it was a portal to the past. They realized that the mirror might hold the key to understanding the fort's curse. They carefully documented their findings and decided to return to the temple to share their discovery with the others. As they regrouped at the temple, they shared their experiences and reviewed the footage Priya had captured. The apparition they had seen was clearly visible, and the emotions it conveyed were palpable. Vikram analyzed the data from the EMF detectors and found significant spikes at the moment the apparition appeared. The discovery of the hidden chamber and the mirror added a new dimension to their investigation. They realized that the fort's curse was more than just a legend, it was a complex web of historical events, supernatural occurrences, and restless spirits seeking resolution. They decided to focus their efforts on understanding the mirror and its connection to the fort's past. They believed that the mirror could provide answers to the questions that had been haunting them. With a renewed sense of purpose, they prepared for another night of exploration, determined to uncover the truth behind the legend of Bhangarh Fort. As the night deepened, they gathered around the mirror, ready to delve into its mysteries. They felt a sense of anticipation and trepidation, knowing that they were on the brink of uncovering secrets that had been hidden for centuries. The mirror's surface seemed to shimmer, reflecting not just their faces, but the faces of those who had come before them. Raghav spoke softly, as if addressing the spirits trapped within the mirror. "We seek the truth. Show us what happened here, and help us understand the curse that binds this place." The mirror's surface rippled, and the reflections shifted. They saw a vision of the fort in its prime, bustling with activity. The people of Bhangarh went about their daily lives, unaware of the tragedy that was about to befall them. They saw Princess Ratnavati, her beauty and grace evident even in the reflection. She was surrounded by courtiers and suitors, but her heart belonged to a humble artist who painted her portrait. The vision changed, showing the arrival of the sorcerer Bala Nath. His eyes glowed with malevolence as he cast a spell on a vial of perfume, intending to ensnare the princess. But Ratnavati, wise beyond her years, saw through his deceit. She threw the vial away, and it shattered, unleashing the sorcerer's curse. The mirror showed the fort in chaos, with people fleeing and the fort crumbling under the weight of the curse. The vision ended with a glimpse of the boulder crushing Bala Nath, his face twisted in rage and agony. The group watched in silence, absorbing the gravity of what they had witnessed. The mirror had given them a glimpse into the past, revealing the events that had led to the fort's curse. They realized that the curse was not just a tale of revenge, but a story of love, betrayal, and tragedy. As the vision faded, they felt a sense of closure. The spirits of Bhangarh had shared their story, and it was now up to the group to honor their memory and ensure that the truth was known. They knew that their journey was far from over, but they felt a renewed sense of purpose. With the dawn of a new day, they prepared to leave the fort, carrying with them the knowledge and experiences that had changed their lives forever. They were determined to share their findings with the world, to shed light on the mysteries of Bhangarh Fort and the legends that had captivated generations. The legend of Bhangarh Fort was far from over, but for Raghav and his friends, the encounter with the supernatural had marked the beginning of a new chapter in their quest for truth. They had faced their fears, uncovered hidden secrets, and forged a bond that would carry them through the challenges ahead. As they walked away from the fort, the sun rising behind them, they knew that their journey was just beginning. The encounter with the spirits of Bhangarh had changed them, and they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with their knowledge, their courage, and their unyielding curiosity. The group returned to their hotel, the weight of their discoveries pressing heavily upon them. The encounter with the spirits of Bhangarh and the vision from the mirror had given them a glimpse into the past, but they knew there was much more to uncover. The curse was not just a supernatural phenomenon, it was a tangled web of historical events and personal tragedies that demanded further exploration. As they gathered in the hotel's common room, Raghav laid out the ancient map they had found in the hidden chamber. The map, now fully unrolled and studied under the light of modern lamps, revealed intricate details of the fort's layout. It showed hidden passages, secret rooms, and cryptic annotations that seemed to hint at even deeper secrets buried within the fort's walls. "Look here," Raghav said, pointing to a series of symbols near the temple area. "These markings are different from the rest. They seem to indicate some sort of ritual site." Vikram leaned in, examining the symbols closely. "These look like astrological symbols," he noted. "Bhangarh's history is steeped in astrology and alchemy. If these symbols are connected to the curse, we need to understand their significance." Priya and Meera exchanged glances. "We need to find someone who can decipher these symbols," Priya said. "An expert in ancient Indian astrology and rituals." Raghav nodded. "I know someone, Professor Arvind Rao, a renowned historian and expert in ancient Indian culture. He taught me during my university days. If anyone can help us make sense of this, it's him." Raghav contacted Professor Rao, explaining their discoveries and the urgency of their request. The professor, intrigued by the mention of Bhangarh and its mysteries, agreed to meet them the next morning. With a sense of anticipation and a plan in place, the group settled in for the night, eager to continue unraveling the mystery. The next morning, they drove to the nearby city where Professor Rao lived. The professor's house was a modest but well-kept bungalow, surrounded by a lush garden filled with various plants and herbs. As they approached, Professor Rao, a man in his 60s with a kind face and sharp eyes, greeted them warmly. "Raghav, it's good to see you," Professor Rao said, shaking his hand. "And these must be your friends. Come in, come in." They entered the professor's study, a room lined with bookshelves filled with ancient texts, manuscripts, and artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and incense. Raghav carefully unrolled the map and laid it on the professor's desk. Professor Rao adjusted his glasses and examined the map closely. "This is extraordinary," he murmured. "I've heard many stories about Bhangarh, but this map, it reveals so much more." He pointed to the symbols Raghav had highlighted. "These are indeed astrological symbols, but they are part of a much larger and complex ritual. The alignment of planets, the phases of the moon, and other celestial events play a crucial role in this." The professor explained that the symbols were part of a powerful ritual meant to harness cosmic energy. Such rituals were often conducted by alchemists and sorcerers seeking to enhance their powers or achieve immortality. The fort's curse, he theorized, could be linked to one such ritual gone wrong. Bala Nath was no ordinary sorcerer, Professor Rao continued. He was a master of dark arts and alchemy. The curse he placed on Bhangarh could be a result of his failed attempt to manipulate these cosmic forces. Meera leaned forward, intrigued. "But what about Princess Ratnavati? How does she fit into this?" Professor Rao nodded. Ratnavati's beauty and wisdom were legendary, but she was also rumored to have a deep understanding of these ancient practices. Bala Nath's obsession with her might have been driven by more than just desire. He could have seen her as the key to completing his ritual. The professor's insights provided a new perspective on their investigation. The curse was not just an act of vengeance, it was part of a larger, more complex narrative involving dark magic, forbidden love, and cosmic forces beyond their comprehension. Raghav thanked Professor Rao for his help and promised to keep him updated on their progress. Armed with this new information, the group returned to Bhangarh, more determined than ever to uncover the full extent of the mystery. As they arrived at the fort, the familiar sense of foreboding settled over them. They split into pairs again, each team focusing on different parts of the fort. Raghav and Meera decided to explore the secret passages indicated on the map, while Priya and Vikram headed towards the ritual site near the temple. Raghav and Meera followed the map to a narrow corridor hidden behind a false wall. The passage was dark and claustrophobic, the air thick with dust. As they moved deeper, they discovered a series of chambers filled with ancient artifacts, books, and alchemical tools. One chamber, in particular, caught their attention. It was adorned with intricate carvings depicting celestial events and astrological symbols. "This must have been Bala Nath's workshop," Meera said, her voice echoing in the confined space. "Look at these carvings. They depict the same symbols we saw on the map." Raghav examined the carvings closely. These symbols seem to describe a specific celestial alignment, he noted. "If we can figure out when this alignment occurred, we might be able to pinpoint the exact time of the curse." Meanwhile, Priya and Vikram reached the ritual site. The area was overgrown with vegetation, but they could still see the remnants of an altar and stone circles etched with symbols. Vikram set up their equipment, hoping to detect any residual energy from past rituals. As they worked, Priya noticed something unusual. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a series of symbols carved into the stones. "These are the same symbols we saw in the cave. They must be connected to the curse." Vikram nodded. "Let's document everything and compare it with the data we collected earlier. If we can find a pattern, it might help us understand how the curse works." As the sun set and darkness enveloped the fort, the air grew colder and the sense of unease intensified. The group reconvened at the temple, sharing their findings and discussing their next steps. They realized that the key to unraveling the mystery lay in understanding the ritual and its connection to the celestial alignment. "We need to find out when this alignment occurred," Raghav said. "If we can pinpoint the date, we might be able to understand the curse's origin and how to break it." Using the data they had collected and the professor's insights, they began to piece together the timeline of events. They cross-referenced historical records, astronomical charts, and the carvings in Bala Nath's workshop. After hours of meticulous work, they finally identified a specific celestial alignment that matched the symbols, a rare conjunction of planets that had occurred over 4 centuries ago, around the time Bhangarh was abandoned. "This is it," Meera said, pointing to the chart. "This alignment happened on the night Bala Nath cast his curse. If we can replicate the conditions of that night, we might be able to reverse the curse." The group was excited but cautious. They knew that attempting to replicate such a powerful ritual could be dangerous, but they were determined to see it through. They spent the next few days preparing for the ritual, gathering the necessary materials and studying the ancient texts they had found in the hidden chambers. On the night of the ritual, they returned to the fort, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The air was charged with energy, and the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky. They set up their equipment and prepared the altar, following the instructions they had pieced together from the ancient texts. As the planets aligned, they began the ritual, chanting the incantations they had learned. The air around them seemed to vibrate with unseen forces, and they felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The ground trembled, and a cold wind swept through the fort, carrying with it the whispers of the past. Suddenly, the mirror they had found in the hidden chamber began to glow, its surface shimmering with an ethereal light. They gathered around it, watching in awe as the mirror revealed another vision. This time, they saw Bala Nath standing at the altar, his face twisted with determination and desperation. He chanted the same incantations, his voice growing louder and more frantic as the ritual progressed. Then, they saw Princess Ratnavati appear, her expression one of sorrow and defiance. She approached Bala Nath, trying to stop him, but he pushed her away, continuing the ritual. The vision grew more intense, the air crackling with energy as the planets aligned perfectly. In a final, desperate act, Ratnavati shattered a vial of perfume, just as the vision had shown before. The liquid splashed onto the altar, disrupting the ritual and causing a violent explosion of energy. The vision ended with a blinding flash of light, and the mirror returned to its normal state. The group stood in stunned silence, the implications of what they had seen sinking in. The ritual had indeed gone wrong, and Ratnavati's actions had inadvertently triggered the curse. But now, they had a chance to set things right. They resumed the ritual, this time incorporating the elements they had seen in the vision. Meera carefully poured a vial of liquid onto the altar, mirroring Ratnavati's actions. As she did, the air grew even colder, and the ground shook more violently. The mirror glowed once more, showing a new vision. They saw the spirits of Bhangarh, their faces no longer twisted in agony but serene and peaceful. Bala Nath's spirit appeared, his expression one of resignation and acceptance. He bowed his head, and the vision faded, leaving them in darkness. The ground stopped shaking, and the air grew still. The sense of foreboding that had hung over the fort lifted, replaced by a feeling of peace and tranquility. The curse had been broken. Exhausted but elated, the group sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what they had accomplished. They had not only uncovered the truth behind the legend of Bhangarh Fort but had also freed the spirits trapped by the curse. As they packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, they felt a sense of closure and fulfillment. Their journey had been long and challenging, but it had brought them closer together and given them a deeper understanding of the past. Raghav looked at his friends, pride and gratitude evident in his eyes. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "We uncovered the truth and broke the curse. The spirits of Bhangarh can finally rest in peace." Meera, Priya, and Vikram nodded, sharing his sense of accomplishment. They had faced their fears, navigated the complexities of the past, and emerged victorious. As they walked away from the fort, the sun rising behind them, they knew that their lives had been forever changed by the mystery they had unraveled and the bonds they had forged. The legend of Bhangarh Fort would continue to captivate and intrigue, but for Raghav and his friends, it had become a story of courage, discovery, and redemption. Their journey was complete, but the memories and lessons they had gained would stay with them, guiding them in whatever adventures lay ahead. Despite the apparent resolution and peace they had felt upon leaving Bhangarh Fort, Raghav, Meera, Priya, and Vikram couldn't shake a lingering sense of incompleteness. The curse might have been broken, but the full depth of the fort's mystery seemed yet to be plumbed. The more they thought about it, the more they realized that their journey was not over. Unanswered questions and uncharted territories beckoned them back to Bhangarh. And so, a few weeks after their initial triumph, the group decided to return for one final exploration. They arrived at the fort just before dusk, their spirits buoyed by a mix of anticipation and determination. This time, they had prepared even more thoroughly, equipping themselves with advanced paranormal investigation tools, additional research material from Professor Rao, and a renewed resolve to uncover the remaining secrets of Bhangarh. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the ancient ruins, the group set up their base at the temple once again. The familiar sense of foreboding settled over them, stronger and more palpable than before. It was as if the fort knew they had returned, and the spirits within were watching, waiting. The group gathered around a small campfire, discussing their strategy for the night. Priya spread out a new map they had obtained from Professor Rao, which showed additional details and possible hidden locations within the fort. She pointed to an area marked as the Heart of Darkness, an uncharted region deep within the fort that had remained unexplored. "This area here," Priya said, her finger tracing the lines on the map, "could be the key to understanding the full extent of the curse. The professor believes it might be where Bala Nath conducted his most powerful rituals." Vikram nodded, his eyes fixed on the map. "If we're going to find any remaining answers, it will be there. We need to prepare for anything, though. The last time we faced some intense experiences, and who knows what awaits us in the heart of the fort." As the clock struck midnight, the group began their journey towards the Heart of Darkness. The fort, silent and eerie, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The temperature dropped sharply, and a dense fog began to form, swirling around their feet as they moved deeper into the fort. They followed the map carefully, their flashlights cutting through the thickening fog. The fort's architecture grew more intricate and foreboding the further they ventured. Elaborate carvings, ancient symbols, and signs of long-forgotten rituals adorned the walls. It was clear that this part of the fort had been a center of immense power and significance. As they approached the designated area, they noticed a large, circular chamber at the end of a narrow corridor. The chamber was unlike anything they had seen before, its walls covered in intricate patterns and symbols that seemed to move and shift in the flickering light of their flashlights. "This must be it," Raghav said, his voice barely above a whisper. The heart of darkness. The group stepped cautiously into the chamber, the air heavy with an oppressive presence. The temperature plummeted further, and they could see their breath forming misty clouds in the cold air. In the center of the chamber stood an ancient stone altar, surrounded by candles that flickered with an eerie, unnatural light. Meera approached the altar, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "Look at these symbols," she said, pointing to the carvings on the altar. "They match the ones we saw in Bala Nath's workshop." Vikram set up their equipment, focusing the cameras and EMF detectors on the altar. "Let's document everything," he said. "We need to understand what happened here and how it ties into the curse." As they began their investigation, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged. The candles flickered more wildly, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The air was thick with the sensation of being watched, and the group could feel the weight of the fort's history bearing down on them. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. The candles' flames shot up, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The group exchanged nervous glances, knowing that they had triggered something powerful. A low, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in an ancient language they couldn't understand. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, reverberating through their very bones. The temperature dropped even further, and the fog thickened, obscuring their vision. Priya clutched her flashlight tightly, her knuckles white. "What is that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Raghav shook his head, his eyes scanning the chamber. "I don't know, but we need to stay calm and focused. Whatever we've awakened, we need to face it together." The voice grew louder, its tone filled with anger and sorrow. The symbols on the walls glowed with an otherworldly light, casting eerie patterns on the fog. The group felt a sudden, intense pressure, as if the very air around them was pressing in, trying to crush them. Meera, her eyes wide with fear and determination, stepped forward. "We need to understand what it's saying," she said. "There must be a way to communicate with it." Vikram adjusted the settings on their recording equipment, hoping to capture the voice more clearly. "If we can get a clean recording, we might be able to translate it later. Let's focus on documenting everything." As they worked, the voice continued to speak, its tone shifting between anger and pleading. The ground trembled more violently, and the fog seemed to pulse in time with the voice. The group felt a growing sense of urgency, knowing that they were running out of time. Suddenly, the voice stopped, and the chamber fell into an oppressive silence. The candles flickered out, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from their flashlights, casting weak beams that barely penetrated the fog. Raghav took a deep breath, his mind racing. "We need to finish this. Let's see if we can find any more clues in the chamber." They spread out, carefully examining the walls and the altar. Meera found a series of inscriptions carved into the stone, written in the same ancient language as the voice. She photographed the inscriptions, hoping they would provide a key to understanding the voice's message. Priya discovered a hidden compartment beneath the altar, containing a collection of scrolls and artifacts. She carefully retrieved them, her hands shaking with excitement and fear. The scrolls were covered in the same intricate symbols and writing, and the artifacts seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. "We need to take these back to Professor Rao," Priya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He might be able to translate the inscriptions and the scrolls." As they gathered the artifacts and prepared to leave, the chamber began to shake more violently. The air grew even colder, and the oppressive presence seemed to close in around them. They knew they had to leave before the fort's malevolent forces overwhelmed them. They hurried back through the narrow corridor, the fog swirling around their feet. The fort seemed to come alive, the walls echoing with the whispers of the past. The ground continued to tremble, and the sense of urgency grew with each step. As they reached the temple, they felt a sudden, intense wave of energy wash over them. The ground beneath them heaved, and they struggled to keep their balance. The oppressive presence grew stronger, and they could feel the weight of the fort's history pressing down on them. "We need to get out of here," Raghav said, his voice filled with urgency. "We have what we need. Let's go." They hurried out of the fort, the fog closing in around them. The ground continued to shake, and the air was filled with the whispers of the past. As they crossed the threshold, the oppressive presence seemed to release its hold on them, and they felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of relief. They reached their car and drove away from the fort, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. The artifacts and scrolls they had retrieved felt heavy with significance, and they knew they had uncovered something of immense importance. Back at their hotel, they carefully laid out the artifacts and scrolls, their minds racing with the possibilities. The inscriptions and writing seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and they knew they had to understand their significance. Raghav contacted Professor Rao, explaining their discoveries and the urgency of their request. The professor, intrigued by the mention of the Heart of Darkness and the powerful ritual site, agreed to meet them the next morning. As they waited for the professor's arrival, they reviewed their recordings and photographs, trying to make sense of the voice and the inscriptions. The ancient language was unlike anything they had encountered before, and they knew they needed the professor's expertise to translate it. The next morning, Professor Rao arrived, his eyes wide with excitement and curiosity. He examined the artifacts and scrolls, his expression growing more intense with each passing moment. "This is extraordinary," he said, his voice filled with awe. "These inscriptions and scrolls contain knowledge of ancient rituals and cosmic forces that have been lost to time. If we can translate them, we might be able to understand the full extent of Bala Nath's power and the true nature of the curse." The group watched as the professor carefully translated the inscriptions and scrolls, his expertise and knowledge guiding them through the ancient language. The process was slow and meticulous, but with each translated word, they gained a deeper understanding of the fort's history and the dark forces at play. The inscriptions revealed that Bala Nath had indeed attempted to harness cosmic forces to achieve immortality and ultimate power. The ritual he conducted at the Heart of Darkness was meant to bind these forces to his will, but Ratnavati's interference had disrupted the ritual, causing the catastrophic curse that had plagued Bhangarh for centuries. The scrolls contained detailed instructions for performing the ritual, as well as warnings about the consequences of failure. They also mentioned a prophecy that spoke of a group of seekers who would come to Bhangarh and unravel the mystery, freeing the spirits trapped by the curse. As the professor continued to translate, they realized that their encounter with the spirits and the vision from the mirror were part of this prophecy. Their journey had been foretold, and they were the seekers destined to uncover the truth and break the curse. The professor's translations also revealed that the voice they had heard in the chamber was that of Bala Nath himself, trapped between worlds and desperate for redemption. His spirit had been bound to the fort, unable to find peace until the curse was lifted. Armed with this new understanding, the group knew they had one final task to complete. They needed to perform a ritual of their own, using the knowledge they had gained, to free Bala Nath's spirit and fully lift the curse from Bhangarh. They returned to the fort one last time, their hearts filled with determination and a sense of destiny. The fog had lifted, and the air was clear, but the sense of foreboding remained. They made their way back to the Heart of Darkness, carrying the artifacts and scrolls that would guide them through the ritual. As they stood before the ancient altar, they felt the weight of the fort's history bearing down on them once again. The ground trembled, and the air grew cold, but they were undeterred. They had come too far to turn back now. Following the instructions in the scrolls, they set up the ritual, placing the artifacts on the altar and lighting the candles. They chanted the incantations, their voices steady and resolute, calling upon the cosmic forces to release Bala Nath's spirit and lift the curse. The air around them crackled with energy, and the ground shook more violently. The symbols on the walls glowed with an intense light, and the oppressive presence seemed to press in on them from all sides. But they held their ground, continuing the ritual with unwavering determination. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the chamber, and they felt a powerful surge of energy wash over them. The ground heaved, and the air was filled with the sound of 1,000 whispers, all converging into a single, resonant voice. The voice of Bala Nath echoed through the chamber, filled with sorrow and relief. "Thank you," it said, "for freeing me from my torment. The curse is lifted, and the spirits of Bhangarh can finally find peace." As the light faded and the ground grew still, they felt a profound sense of calm and tranquility. The oppressive presence was gone, and the fort seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. They had completed their journey, fulfilling the prophecy and bringing an end to the curse that had haunted Bhangarh for centuries. Exhausted but triumphant, they made their way out of the fort, the first light of dawn breaking on the horizon. They knew that their lives had been forever changed by the experience, and the bonds they had forged would endure long after their adventure had ended. Back at their hotel, they celebrated their victory, toasting to their success and the spirits they had freed. They knew that their story would become part of the legend of Bhangarh, a tale of courage, discovery, and redemption that would inspire future generations of seekers. Raghav, Meera, Priya, and Vikram had faced their fears, navigated the complexities of the past, and emerged victorious. Their journey was complete, but the memories and lessons they had gained would stay with them, guiding them in whatever adventures lay ahead. The legend of Bhangarh Fort would continue to captivate and intrigue, but for them, it had become a story of friendship, perseverance, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The feeling of triumph and closure from their previous adventure at Bhangarh Fort slowly started to fade as Raghav, Meera, Priya, and Vikram returned to their everyday lives. The peace they had achieved felt increasingly fragile, as if the fort's ancient history was not yet fully appeased. Despite their efforts to move on, the sense that something crucial was left unfinished gnawed at them. This sentiment grew stronger with each passing day, leading to restless nights and an inexplicable pull towards the fort. A month after their last visit, Raghav received an urgent call from Professor Rao. The professor's voice was filled with an unusual mix of excitement and concern. "Raghav, I've been going through the scrolls and artifacts you retrieved from Bhangarh, and I've discovered something troubling. It appears there's more to the curse than we initially thought. There are references to a hidden artifact, something called the Heart of the Serpent, which might hold the key to fully lifting the curse." The word sent a shiver down Raghav's spine. "What do you mean, Professor? We thought we had already lifted the curse." "I know," Rao replied, "but the texts suggest that while we've freed the spirits, the true source of Bala Nath's power remains. If the Heart of the Serpent isn't found and neutralized, the curse could reawaken. It's a failsafe Bala Nath put in place to ensure his power could never be fully eradicated." Raghav thanked the professor and immediately called a meeting with Meera, Priya, and Vikram. The group convened at their usual spot, a cozy cafe that had become their de facto headquarters. The mood was somber as Raghav relayed the professor's findings. "We need to go back," Meera said firmly. "We can't leave the job half done." Priya nodded in agreement. "We owe it to the spirits and to ourselves to see this through." Vikram, always the pragmatic one, looked around the table. "If we're going back, we need to prepare even more thoroughly than before. This time, we can't afford any mistakes." They spent the next week gathering supplies, researching the Heart of the Serpent, and consulting with Professor Rao. The professor provided them with more detailed translations of the scrolls, which included cryptic references to the artifact's location and the immense power it held. It became clear that the artifact was not only a source of Bala Nath's power but also a beacon for the curse's dark energy. Armed with this new knowledge and fortified by their previous experience, the group set out for Bhangarh once again. This time, their mission felt even more urgent and perilous. As they approached the fort, the familiar sense of foreboding returned, stronger than ever. The fort's ancient walls loomed ominously as they made their way inside. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, and the shadows seemed to dance with malevolent intent. They set up their base at the temple, just as before, but this time the atmosphere felt charged with a dangerous energy. Following the professor's translations, they began their search for the Heart of the Serpent. The scrolls indicated that the artifact was hidden in a secret chamber beneath the fort, a place that Bala Nath had fortified with powerful protective spells. The exact location of the entrance was not clear, but the texts mentioned a series of clues embedded in the fort's architecture. Their first clue led them to a series of carvings in the main courtyard. The carvings depicted scenes of ancient rituals and cosmic battles, with one particular image standing out, a serpent coiled around a heart, its eyes gleaming with a sinister light. "That's it," Vikram said, pointing to the carving. "The Heart of the Serpent. We need to find where this leads." They carefully examined the carving, searching for any hidden mechanisms or symbols. Meera noticed a faint inscription at the base of the carving, partially obscured by centuries of grime. She gently cleaned the surface, revealing a series of ancient symbols. Priya, who had studied the scrolls extensively, recognized the symbols as coordinates. "These symbols are directions. We need to follow them to find the entrance." Following the coordinates, they made their way through the fort, deciphering clues and overcoming obstacles that had been left to deter intruders. Each step brought them closer to the heart of Bala Nath's dark domain, and the sense of danger grew with each passing moment. They eventually arrived at a secluded part of the fort, an area they had not explored in their previous visits. The entrance to the secret chamber was hidden behind a false wall, cleverly disguised to blend in with the surrounding architecture. With a sense of trepidation, they activated the hidden mechanism, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The air grew colder as they descended, and the walls seemed to close in around them. The oppressive energy they had felt above ground intensified, pressing down on them like a tangible weight. They reached the bottom of the staircase, finding themselves in a small, dimly lit chamber. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it rested the heart of the serpent. The artifact was a dark, gleaming orb, pulsating with a malevolent energy. The serpent carved around it seemed to writhe and twist, as if alive. Raghav approached the pedestal cautiously. "This is it, the heart of the serpent." As he reached out to touch the artifact, a powerful force pushed him back, sending him sprawling to the ground. The chamber filled with a deep, resonant hum, and the air crackled with energy. The serpent's eyes glowed with a fiery intensity, and a shadowy figure appeared before them. It was Bala Nath, his spirit bound to the artifact. His face was a mask of rage and sorrow, his eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. "You dare to disturb my domain," he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The heart of the serpent is mine. You will not take it from me." The group stood their ground, knowing they had no choice but to confront Bala Nath's spirit and neutralize the artifact. Priya, drawing on the knowledge from the scrolls, began to chant the incantations that would weaken the spirit's hold on the artifact. Meera and Vikram set up their equipment, capturing the intense energy and documenting the encounter. Raghav, recovering from the initial shock, joined Priya in the ritual, adding his voice to the incantations. The chamber shook with a violent energy, and the air grew thick with a palpable sense of danger. Bala Nath's spirit lashed out, trying to disrupt the ritual and drive them away. Shadows danced on the walls, and the temperature plummeted further, but they held their ground, their determination unwavering. As the incantations grew in intensity, the heart of the serpent began to pulse with a blinding light. The serpent coiled around it writhed and twisted, its eyes glowing with a fierce light. Bala Nath's spirit screamed in rage and pain, his form flickering and weakening. Raghav felt a surge of energy as the incantations reached their climax. He stepped forward, reaching out to the heart of the serpent. This time, the force that had pushed him back before was gone, and his hand closed around the artifact. The moment he touched it, a searing pain shot through him, but he held on, focusing all his energy on the ritual. The light from the artifact intensified, filling the chamber with a blinding brilliance. Bala Nath's spirit let out a final, agonized scream before dissipating into the ether. The ground beneath them shook one last time, then grew still. The oppressive energy lifted, and the chamber was filled with a sense of calm and tranquility. The heart of the serpent, now drained of its dark energy, lay dormant in Raghav's hand. They had done it. The true source of the curse had been neutralized, and Bala Nath's spirit was finally at peace. Exhausted but triumphant, they made their way back up the narrow staircase, the heart of the serpent safely secured. Back at their base in the temple, they carefully examined the artifact, ensuring that it was truly inert. The malevolent energy that had once surrounded it was gone, replaced by a sense of quiet stillness. They knew that their journey was finally complete, and the curse of Bhangarh had been fully lifted. As they left the fort for the last time, the sun rose on the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the ancient ruins. They felt a profound sense of closure and fulfillment, knowing that they had accomplished what they had set out to do. Raghav looked at his friends, his eyes filled with gratitude and pride. "We did it. We finished what we started." Meera, Priya, and Vikram nodded, their faces reflecting the same sense of accomplishment. They had faced their fears, navigated the complexities of the past, and emerged victorious. Their journey had been long and challenging, but it had brought them closer together and given them a deeper understanding of the fort's history and their own resilience. As they drove away from Bhangarh, they knew that their lives had been forever changed by the experience. The bonds they had forged would endure, and the memories and lessons they had gained would stay with them, guiding them in whatever adventures lay ahead. Back in their everyday lives, they remained in close contact, their shared experience creating an unbreakable connection. They continued to study the scrolls and artifacts, sharing their knowledge with Professor Rao and contributing to the understanding of Bhangarh's history. The legend of Bhangarh Fort would continue to captivate and intrigue, but for Raghav, Meera, Priya, and Vikram, it had become a deeply personal journey, one that had forever changed their lives. As they drove away from the fort, they carried with them not just the relief of having lifted the curse, but also a newfound sense of purpose. In the weeks that followed, the group found themselves grappling with the return to their everyday routines. The mundane rhythms of life felt different now, imbued with the gravity of their recent adventure. They stayed in close contact, meeting regularly to discuss their findings and to plan the next steps for their research. Their bond, strengthened by the trials they had faced, was unbreakable. Raghav continued to collaborate with Professor Rao, diving deeper into the historical and mystical aspects of the artifacts they had uncovered. The professor, impressed by their bravery and determination, suggested that they consider publishing their findings. Raghav agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to share their experiences and to contribute to the broader understanding of Bhangarh's enigmatic history. Meera, inspired by their journey, decided to pursue a master's degree in archaeology. She wanted to further her knowledge and continue exploring the mysteries of India's ancient sites. Her passion for uncovering the past had only grown stronger, and she felt a deep connection to the stories and lives that had shaped history. Priya, whose keen intellect and meticulous research had been crucial to their success, started writing a book about their experiences. She aimed to weave together the historical, cultural, and personal aspects of their adventure, hoping to inspire others to look beyond the surface of myths and legends. Her book would be a testament to the power of curiosity and the importance of seeking truth. Vikram, ever the pragmatist, returned to his work with a renewed sense of purpose. He applied the lessons learned from their adventure to his career in engineering, focusing on problem-solving and teamwork. His analytical mind and calm demeanor had been vital in navigating the dangers they faced, and he continued to be a steady anchor for the group. As they settled back into their lives, the group made a pact to continue their explorations. There were countless other sites with hidden histories and untold stories, and they were determined to uncover them. Their experience at Bhangarh had shown them the value of perseverance, courage, and collaboration. The end. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. If you enjoyed our exploration of ghosts, mythical creatures, and urban legends, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling episodes. Until next time, my beloved listeners.